Good morning. Happy Wednesday. It's another episode of the Rebel HR's live Ask Me Anything coffee chat. Join in. Come say hello in the comments. Let me know where you're joining from. It's the only way I know you're here. For some really odd reason, you can't see who's watching in StreamYard unless somebody leaves a comment. So, very intuitive. So leave a comment for me. Also, let's get to our questions earlier than later. What perpetually happens is people have to get warmed up and then they start dropping their questions after I've been yapping for a while. And then we get to the end and we still have questions that didn't get addressed. Let's not do that. Let's get our questions in early so that we can have a really thorough discussion about them. And if you don't have questions, I'm sure I can find something to talk about. It's not really very difficult for me to do. Lots of good topics and content on LinkedIn always. So we can address some of those. Yeah. Join in. Good morning. Welcome. Drop your questions in the chat. For housekeeping purposes, there is a QR code up at the top of the video in the corner. You can see it over there. And it's a Buy Me a Coffee link. And it's because all these little tools and StreamYard and platforms and things I do to help everyone cost a little bit of money, not a lot. I'm not trying to make any here. I'm trying to break even, just get the tools and stuff paid for, and that would make me happy. Join on in. Hopefully people have some good juicy questions today. We can talk about anything, job market things, ATS, AI things, top of funnel friction in the interview process. We can talk about interviewing. We can talk about resumes. We can talk about whatever you guys want. I am here for you. And I guess I sort of like to talk a little, but that's not really why I'm here. I don't actually have the time to do this, but I do want to make sure that I find ways to offer value and share my knowledge. I've been doing recruiting for 27 years. I spent the first 10 years of this is something I haven't done yet. I'll give you my background. So I spent the first 10 years of my career way back in the 20th century, in the late 90s, in the agency recruiting world. And I spent about 10 years in the agency world, progressing into management roles and branch manager and area manager. I was relocated to Colorado with Apple One to take over branches that were losing money. I was always attracted to the bigger problems because I liked solving problems. So that was what I enjoyed. If an office was losing money, it was a wonderful challenge to take on. And I really loved the opportunity to make a distinct and clear impact, right? When you take an office from losing money to making money and then being one of the top offices in the company, you get credit for that impact. I liked that a lot. In fact, one of the things I liked better about the agency world than corporate is I liked the difference in dynamic. This is a good thing to explain. I'll tell you, after I left the agency world for 10 years, I went into corporate for 15, mostly in tech startups, scaled a bunch, handled a bunch of acquisition things, IPO things like that. So I think it's a good time to tell everybody the difference between how recruiters and agency are incentivized and think compared to how corporate recruiters are incentivized and think, because it's very different. And that's why you get very different energies from both. And it's also why people completely misunderstand the term recruiter and conflate it all into one function. And it's not. Maybe that's our fault for naming things all the same. But typically recruiting in corporate, it's called talent acquisition. But also there are plenty of corporate companies that call their recruiters recruiters. So again, highly confusing. I get it. So on the agency side, recruiters are actually revenue generators. So everybody who's doing either business development, finding the jobs to fill, or recruiting and filling the jobs, and sometimes that's the same person in what they call a 360 desk. Sometimes it's two different functions. There's the people who go do the sales, get the jobs, bring them back, and then the recruiters that manage the accounts and fill the jobs. Either way, anybody who's recruiting in the agency world is driven by commission. These are revenue generators. These are people who, there are two different kinds, like there are a lot of different kinds of models for recruiting, but the two most popular, without getting into too much detail in the weeds here, the two most popular are contingency recruiting and retained recruiting. Okay. Now, contingency recruiting, much like many of you have heard contingency in legal, it's similar. It's that the fee only is paid if a placement is made. Okay. So let's talk about what that looks like. I get a director of marketing role, okay, with a company, and we sign an agreement and they say, yes, we'll pay you 20% as soon as you help us place this director of marketing. Awesome. There's no money up front. There are no guarantees. There is no exclusivity. Sometimes there's exclusivity, but very rarely with a contingent search. So what does that mean? It means they've given you the right to go hunt for their director of marketing. But it also means they may have given other people the right to go hunt for their director of marketing. And of course, they've posted their director of marketing and probably have internal team looking through candidates that way. And they're also getting referrals from everyone in their network and blah, blah, blah. So it's like you're invited to participate, but nothing may ever come of it. And often nothing comes of it. Okay. So if recruiters are reaching out to you and they're like, you look great for a director of marketing role that I'm working on, and they give you very little information, it's not because they're trying to be sneaky. It's because they need to talk to you before they give you that information. Why? Because if I just respond back, oh, it's for ABC company and here's the comp and here's the job description, blah, 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 50% of the people are going to go apply directly with the company. Why? People don't like recruiters right now. Why? Because they have a perception that they have a better chance of getting hired without a recruiter and a fee than if they just enter the general population of applicants. Lots of things, lots of reasons why recruiters can't just openly give you all that information. Now, that same recruiter working for ABC company, also trying to fill the same director of marketing, but they're not in an agency. They actually work for the company that's hiring the director of marketing. That's an internal corporate recruiter. That person gets paid a salary, maybe a bonus, whether they fill it or not. I mean, obviously, if they don't fill roles, they won't have a job very long, but their comp and salary and money isn't contingent on filling this particular role. So when they reach out, there's less pressure for them to optimize their time, right? I can't spend a lot of time talking to people who my client's not going to hire if it's all contingency, if like I get nothing unless I fill it, and half the time we get nothing, even if we do come up with great candidates, because, they last minute, they got a referral, or, at the last minute, they put the role on hold, or, they changed some stuff, or, all of a sudden they have the perfect internal candidate that they forgot about. All that stuff is real and it happens on the contingency. Now, the other type is retained. All that means is typically it's split in thirds, and a third of the fee gets charged as a retainer up front. So if you don't hire from me, you don't get that money back, right? So say I'm going to make up a number. Say it's a $30,000 fee. That's probably low for a retained search in real life. It's usually bigger than that. But say it's 30,000 because it's an easy number to split in threes, and it's early and I'm tired. So they pay $10K up front. They pay 10K once I've submitted whatever the terms of the agreement are, a slate of 5 qualified candidates that are interviewable. Boom, I get the second success fee. And then when they make a hire, I get the third. Now, very often, if a company pays a retainer, they're not going to play games and give it to 40 agencies and also be working on it themselves and also this and entertain. They'll still entertain referrals and internals because they have to, but that actually doesn't work against the agency recruiter. They still are getting a fee. Okay. So those are the two differences. And that's the difference in terms of incentive. Why does it matter? Because the people who reach out to you from both sides. So here's something people don't understand. Corporate agency recruiters often have to look for passive candidates. They have to proactively source passive candidates, because if people are just applying, actively, and they're actively on the market, that's not a candidate the company couldn't have found themselves. Kind of one of the value props of a recruiting agency is like, we can find the hard to find candidates that you can't find. We can go talk to the people happily working, and get them excited about your opportunity, so you don't have to just rely on applicants. Now, this is as good a forum as any for me to say, I don't really understand why companies are still, prioritizing passive candidates in a market where there's so much great talent actively on the market because of sweeping mass layoffs across all of tech. Like, I don't get it. I have always understood why we went after passive candidates until the market shifted in about 2023. Okay. No other period in my 27 years of experience did I have an issue with the idea of going and trying to get passive candidates excited, headhunting, which is where that term comes from. I never have had a problem with it. I built my career on it. I was great at it. It was successful. People appreciated being contacted by recruiters. So they always knew kind of what was happening in the market and what opportunities were out there. Yay. But in this market, I feel like so much has shifted mindset wise, mentality, just circumstantial, the amount of talent on the market. All those things, right, have shifted. And so like companies also need to kind of come up off of that scarcity bias. That's what drives people to believe that people working are more valuable than people not working. It's called scarcity bias. It's the same exact energy. Hear this. I love this comparison. It's the same energy that makes people who are married and taken more attractive. Like, people want them more because they already are in a relationship than single people who they perceive may be something wrong with that single. Maybe there's a reason that single person is single. So, the taken person appears more attractive because somebody else has them. So it's a scarcity bias is absolutely what drives this mentality. And in this job market, it's silly. It's foolish, actually. I'm talking to some incredible director level candidates, and some of them are actively on the market, but they've never been any other time in their career. Any other time in their career, they wanted to leave a job, find a new one, or do anything. All they had to do was whisper out into their network, and they had 3 offers. That's what the market has been for a lot of people for the last 2 decades. Let's get real, right? It's shifted, and now it feels like everything is broken. Well, everything's not broken, but supply and demand is off, right? Lots of available talent due to sweeping mass layoffs all across tech. Yeah, lots of people on the market. So interesting times for sure. Okay, so either nobody's here and I'm sitting here talking to myself, which is very possible. I accept that could be the case. But nobody has any questions. So I will talk a little bit longer, but if I don't get a question by 8:30, I'm going to be logging off because I know people do watch this later. So I don't want to have no content. So I'll talk a little bit longer. I think I made a post yesterday. It was kind of around the topic of why are we still over indexing on passive working applicants. So I've seen a couple posts lately that are talking about, with the job market being as horrible as it is, people aren't leaving their jobs, right? There's this sense of they'll stay in a miserable situation right now, just in exchange for the stability and the security of not having to be on the job market in this hellacious time. Totally get it. So the data is, the quit rate is less than 2%. That's the big headline. I mean, I've seen many different pieces of content, posts, articles, stories, blogs, etc., driven around this data point of less than 2% quit rate. Job hugging. We have to give it a cute name because, I mean, like, it wouldn't be real if it didn't have some cool name that could sound awesome in a headline. Job hugging. Everybody's job hugging. They're miserable at work, but they don't want to be out in this market, so they're job hugging. I just think it's hysterical. But anyway, regardless of what you want to call it, people aren't leaving. So the commentary around that is, recruiters, companies, you have to work twice as hard to get to those passive candidates, to get them to notice you. They're heads down, working hard, probably stretched thin because everybody's lean right now. It feels like everybody is running lean. No one has bandwidth, but whatever. You have to do extra sourcing activity to get in front of those people. Why? Why do you have to do that when there's so many applicants, good candidates? I've never seen so many good candidates applying for a job in my 27 years of recruiting, right? That's now. There's no, like, why are we going after the same kind of candidates, same talent, just because they're working? They're not necessarily better than the people who were laid off. In fact, there's some incredible laid off talent. So I made a post and I compared it to Apple. I've been comparing things to apples a lot lately. I made a money comparison to apples, hoarding money and hoarding apples, and the insanity that would ensue if it was apples and not cash. But when it's cash, it's perfectly acceptable. But anyway, here's another Apple analogy. And maybe I need to do a whole Apple analogy or Apple metaphor book. I get those mixed a lot. But it's like this. You have a beautiful apple tree, right? And there's a windstorm. And right after the windstorm would be analogous to layoffs in this story, okay? So after the windstorm comes through, the very, very next morning, there are tons of absolutely perfect, ripe, beautiful, shiny apples with no damage just sitting on the ground right underneath the apple tree for the taking. You can have bushels of these beautiful, perfect apples all over the underneath of the tree. But you're like, no, I don't want the apples that are perfect on the floor. I want the apples that are all the way up at the top of the tree, happily growing right where they are. I want to pluck those. So I'm going to strap myself up and I'm going to shimmy up the tree and go hunting for apples, ignoring bushels of beautiful, perfect, undamaged apples right under the tree, right in front of you. That is what companies are doing right now. Ignoring all the wonderful, incredible talent around that is going to eventually sit under that tree for a very long time. And the longer they sit, the more they rot and the more damaged they become. Now, that's very much what's happening in the job market, right? There's tons of great candidates, tons of wonderful talent, recently laid off, nothing wrong with them. Some algo spit out a list, and they're wonderful people, and they're great, and they're contributors, and they're going to come in and they're going to work hard, and they're never going to want to be in this job market again. I actually have the opposite bias. If you go pluck somebody off the top of the tree, you go, force yourself on a passive candidate and get them all excited about the opportunity and snatch them away from their company, that person is a flight risk much faster than the person who's been out of work for 3 months, has tasted the job market, knows they never, ever want to play in that sandbox ever again. They are going to come in and work their asses off. So I have a bias. My bias is that people who have experienced this job market will work harder for you than people who believe they have tons of options and never will stop having tons of options. So there's another perspective. I want to shift that perspective, and I want to use, I've posted this many times. I've shared my perspective several times. I've shared my alternative bias about who's going to work harder, who's going to be a better employee, and why, right? People who have experienced this market and tasted how hard it is to land are not going to risk having to be there again. That's my bias. Okay. I've posted about it, but I wanted to say it. I haven't gotten a chance to say it out loud, say it on camera. I mean, this is a clip right here. This last 120 seconds was a great clip. Let's clip that. Right. And because companies need to hear this. It made sense. It no longer makes sense. It's a silly bias, and the opposite bias makes more sense. Critical thinking for the win. Just because something's always been a certain way doesn't mean that when the dynamic in the market shifts, that it still makes sense to continue with that approach. It doesn't. It did used to make sense. There was a time when great talent didn't apply for jobs because they weren't sitting on the market, because they would never have been laid off en masse, because companies didn't lay off en masse following profit quarters. Why? Anyway, all right. So we're approaching my cutoff point. I'm not getting questions. I've said some stuff. I've talked about a few topics that I think are relevant and valuable to hear. Oh, here's something. I'm going to be doing, I'm appearing on a podcast next week. It's, I believe, next Tuesday. Hold on. Yeah. So it's, I believe, the 20, what is it? The 28th. Sorry, I have to look at a calendar because my days are all mangled. Okay, so next week, Tuesday, the 28th, myself and Desiree Goldie and Mayim, and I will totally mess up his name if I try, so I'm not. But the founder of Round One .ai is going to be, we're going to be on a call together, on a podcast rather, and we're going to be talking about hiring manager issues, the challenges that we've had with hiring managers. Are they the problem? You know, because everyone's always blaming recruiters because we're the face people. We're the ones standing at the door. We're the easiest ones to see. So we are the scapegoats for anything and everything wrong in hiring. And so this is a conversation about, but are the hiring managers also the problem? Maybe. So we'll get to vent about some hiring manager stuff. You won't want to miss it because we are a bunch of truth-telling, transparent people who are a little bit provocative, and we really like to get the conversation going. Don't miss that. Bring your popcorn. It's going to be fun. So I have lots of stories. You can only imagine in 27 years of recruiting, some of the stuff I've seen and some of the hiring manager fails and foibles that I've encountered and would love to share with you for a good laugh. So join us next Tuesday. I have actually shared that link also on my LinkedIn posts. I shared it yesterday. You can check it out, and please do join us. I'm going to give you guys like another minute to throw any questions in there because I'm running out of things to say, which is like a big flashing signal and message for me to shush and get off the screen. I'm not one that thinks that, you know, talking just to talk or making content just for the sake of making content is valuable. If there isn't something to say, I won't talk. Just like you'll see me post 5 things in one day and no things the next 5 days because I post when I have something to say and I don't post when I don't, and I don't follow any schedule, and authenticity is my guidepost. Yeah, so y'all are about to lose me. Another 20 seconds, throw a question in there, a comment, something for me to react to. Otherwise, I'm going to bounce. I may come next week, so please do join next week if you're watching this after. I may come next week with some unhinged LinkedIn posts and start doing some live reacts because I think people are just running out of questions. And so, because I've talked about a lot over the last couple months. So I think I'm going to start doing some live reacts to unhinged LinkedIn posts because, I spend a lot of time in the comments. I might as well get on screen, and it's easier for me to talk about my perspective than to try to do so in a comment, with a certain number of words. So I think I might do that. So join us next week for maybe some live reacts. Yeah, I'll see you then. Thanks for joining.